Hello, good evening. Welcome to another exciting moment where we talk about some details in the world of business. It is Business 101 and my name is Blyden Ukem. In Business 101, we look at the nitty-gritty of businesses, the direction of different businesses, governmental policies, what the fundamentals are, what are the principles, what are the effects. We'll look at areas of taxation and all of it. And in Business 360 today, we'll be talking about CBN's latest policies and their implications. Well, one of those policies will be that of the exemption regarding the cybersecurity levy. It's been making rounds. Many people are talking about it. Some people are calling for the government to stop. And we begin a conversation this way, looking at salary payment, loan disbursement as one of those, some of those 16 exemptions of cybersecurity levy. On May 6th, the Central Bank of Nigeria, CBN, directed all financial institutions to implement 0.5% cybersecurity levy on all electronic transactions. The new policy was expected to take effect in 2 weeks, according to a circular jointly signed by Chibuzo Efobi, CBN's Director of Payment System Management, and Haruna Mustafa, Director of Financial Policy and Regulations. The CBN had said the deduction should be described as a cybersecurity levy. The financial regulator also said that the deduction and collection of a cybersecurity levy is a signal to the enactment of the 2024 Cybercrime Prohibition Prevention, looking at the Amendment Act of 2024. The Apex Bank added that the 0.5% will go to the National Cybersecurity Fund, which could be administered by the Office of the NSC. For clarification, if the transfer of 50,000 naira, looking at it, a 0.5% of the levy could amount to 250 naira and will be deducted from one's account. And similarly, if it's 100,000 naira or 100,000 naira is transferred, 500 naira will be deducted as a cybersecurity levy, while a transfer of 1 million naira will attract a levy of 5,000 naira. But it didn't end there, talking about a cybersecurity levy. While there were conversations from Tinubu's aide, Onanuga, he made the clarification that it wouldn't be 0.0, it would not be anywhere 0.5%, but rather 0.005%. Well, let's look at details of it. The attraction that comes with it, as Bayo Onanuga gave the indications on this particular one, and says it's going to be 0.005% instead of 0.5%. Well, this would be part of the conversations we have today and the attraction in it, looking at even other policies from the CBN in recent times. Monetary policy took place. The government also gave different indications in support of different of these policies. And we'll look at how these imply in the economy, on the individuals, and on Nigeria as a state. It would be the conversation as my guest is standing by. Afterwards, he will join the show to give different angles to all the policies we're ruling out or will be ruling out from the Central Bank of Nigeria. We'll go on a quick break, and when we're back, Business 101 continues, looking at all the CBN policies and their implications in the country for individuals and for the country as a whole. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back. It is Business 360 and my name is Platinum. Today in Business 360, as I said earlier, we'll be looking at CBN's policy, talking about the Central Bank of Nigeria, the various policies that laid out in particular the last 2 weeks, and we'll try to find out indices around it, what the positivities are, probably the negativities. What do they mean? Why are they coming up with some of these policies? And one of those of such policies would be they're looking at the exempted items on the charges for cybersecurity levy. What is the cybersecurity levy all about, and why CBN are coming up with it? Well, my guest is standing by, ready for the talking point. Mr. Udi Ebel, he's a banker, not just a banker, an economist, and he's been giving perspective on this show, and he's back at it. Mr. Ebel Udi, welcome to the show this evening.
Thank you for having me, Blyden. It's good to be on your show.
All right, let's begin the conversation as fast as possible. And where to start from would be the cybersecurity levy. It was this week we had 0.5% cybersecurity levy on all electronic transactions that took place within the Nigerian space and the market, talking about the financial sector. But afterwards, there was also a different conversation from the aide from the president, and he said it is not 0.5%, but rather 0.05%. Let's begin a conversation this way. Add perspective to it now. When we talk about cybersecurity levy from a banker's point of view and CBN's point of view, what are they really talking about? Because the trade union has come out to be against it, and many other bodies, entrepreneurial bodies, are against the cybersecurity levy, despite those exemptions being there. In the course of the show, we'll talk about exemptions, but what are they referring to, cybersecurity levy?
Well, for what the cybersecurity levy is a new levy by the CBN to fund the porosity of our cyberspace in Nigeria. And the Cybersecurity Act of 2015, which was assented by the former President Goodluck Jonathan, gave a provision of 0.5%, of bank transaction. However, the policy, the act was not implemented because there were technical issues to be ironed out, and one of these critical issues is the rate, and that has seen the act dormant for upward of 9 years now. Now, for the president to, for the president of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu to introduce this levy, is a source of concern, considering the issues we have in the country at the moment of high inflation and high cost of living. So, what the implications of the cybersecurity levies? It will increase cost for businesses.
Okay. And
even a lot of banks will be hard hit by this policy because most of the big businesses, most of the banks, most of the corporate businesses in Nigeria, they bank with the big five that we call FUGAs, First Bank, UBA, Guarantee, Access, and Zenith. And to avoid this cybersecurity levy, a lot of SMEs will move to those big banks at the detriment of smaller banks. So what we're going to see is there's going to be a run on smaller banks in favor of the big bank. And also, for those that will not run, that will not move to the big bank, they will transfer the cybersecurity levy to their consumers, you and I. So that poses a lot of challenge to us. And another issue we should look at is, if we are introducing a form of taxation, this is not a consumption tax. And so it's consumption tax that you take at the point of buying. You're taking this per transaction. Nobody's taking. There's no service being provided here, and you're taxing the people. You understand? And in actual fact, you're taxing revenue instead of taxing profit.
Okay.
You understand? So taxes should be applied on profit and not on revenue. So this new levy also poses another challenge for financial inclusion, because people will try as much as possible to avoid banking at this point, because at this point, 100 naira, 50 naira, adds up for people at the grassroots.
Yeah.
For instance, you have a customer that as a distributor that banks with, let's say, a Wema bank, and does 40 million transfers to Nestle on a weekly basis. Are you saying that business will incur 200,000 naira every week to transfer money to Zenith? It is ridiculous. If he does that 4 times in a month, yeah, he's going to transfer 800,000. He's going to charge 800,000 naira. And he will transfer that 800,000 naira to me and you. And if he decides to move to First Bank or Zenith, where Nestle have the corporate account, the other bank where he's moving from will feel the impact of the loss of his business. So one thing I want you to understand is that for the previous administrations not to have implemented this law, it shows something was wrong with the law. And yesterday, the House of Representatives told the CBN to put a stop on the implementation of this levy, while the Senate is in support of the idea. However, we want to see in the next 2 weeks what the implementation will be like, because even Labour, I said, look, this is not a policy for this period. And in looking at taxation, we need to look at the words of the former British Prime Minister, Margaret Thatcher. She said, you can't tax a country's way into poverty. And the one thing we should also look at is that security enjoys one of the highest votes from our budgetary allocation. So if you are imposing further taxes on the people to fight cyber crimes, I think it is too much a ask for the people. We need to understand that, look, Nigerians have lost, what we call it now, subsidies on currency through the devaluation or through the depreciation of the naira. We also lost subsidy in terms of petroleum products, subsidy. So the federal government is muting the increase in VAT at the same time, and also introducing this sort of huge levy. I think it is too much for Nigerians to bear at this time, and that is why we have seen the outcry of people against this particular law. And one of the things we also need to look at is, look, how is this law going to be managed? This money is not going to be via appropriation. This money goes directly to the Office of National Security Advisor. For me, it is wrong that the money should go directly to a government agency. Government expenditure should be via appropriation. You understand? And when there's no legislative oversight over this form of money, it becomes an issue of accountability. You understand? So I think for me, the federal government should, and through the CBN, should sit back, look at this law in view of what Nigerians are going through, and the National Assembly should spring into action. And if we need to have a cybersecurity bill fund, it should be part of company income tax, and not a tax on the individual Nigerians.
All right. Well, not a tax on individual Nigerians. What a conversation it is. Good perspective from you, Mr. Udi Ebel. Well, let's have one clarity now. You've talked about 0.5%. Tinubu's aide, Onanuga, came out and gave a clarification when this taxation law came out, or a circular regarding it came out. And he said it's not 0.5%, it is 0.005%. In other words, it wouldn't be so much on individuals in the country or so much on Nigerians. Before I ask the next question, which is something that I'm big onto, just clarify this. Is there any change in that regard, that it's not 0.5, it is 0.005%?
I think the CBN circular was clear on the rate. The CBN said 0.5%, and spelled it out and said half of 1% of the transaction volume. Unfortunately, Onanuga came on Twitter to clarify issues, but quickly deleted the tweet, because if you divide 0.5 by 100, it gives you 0.005. You understand? So it was just an error on the part of Bayo Onanuga, which quickly.
Because many felt probably was intentional. But let's not talk about by now. Let's talk about now from the perspective of the federal government and CBN in that regard. When you look at this particular law, what were they thinking, those in charge of their affairs, the CBN Governor Cardoso and the rest of them now? And what are their thoughts regarding cybersecurity? Is the state of cybersecurity in the country at a heightened level that it requires taxing the people? And then when you look at it, a way to curtail it, because World Bank gave a report recently, we'll talk about that. But when you look at it, is this the way to go to fight cybersecurity in the country?
Now, the thing is this: we are beneficiaries of the cyberspace, because the cyberspace allows you and I to to use this app and use data for this interview. We're also beneficiaries of the cyberspace because the cyberspace allows me to transfer money from my bank to another bank.
Yeah.
However, for these services, we pay a token, we pay a fee.
Absolutely.
So, like the education tax fund, I think the cybersecurity fund should be removed from the main users of the cyberspace. Those that they generate income from the cyberspace should be taxed, to protect the cyberspace, while they can actually now spread the cost to end user. And if they spread it to end user, it becomes very, very minimal and infinitesimal. But if you decide to charge everybody, you'll be pulling up so much fund. And what exactly is the budget? What's the budget for fighting cyber crime? Nobody knows. But you want to tax everybody in the economy, get a criminal war chest of money, and give it to an arm of the executive without legislative oversight to run. So I think that is one of the critical issues that Nigerians are asking. Look, this money is too much. You are directing taxation to the people instead of corporate bodies that are making money off the cyberspace. And also, there's no legislative oversight or budgetary provision for this kind of money. For me, I think the law, the act, is troublesome. You understand? And I think we should not empower any agency to just tax Nigerians. Because whether we like it or not, within the OECD, countries in Europe, there's a conscious effort to reduce company income tax. And we look at in the Nigerian space, the company income tax in Nigeria is 30%. We still have 2% for education tax fund, which is one of the highest in the world. So I think the policy focus of the federal government should be to create more wealth, to create more companies that can pay 30%, and from there you appropriate for the fight against cyber insecurity, not taxing people, everybody, yes, and to fight a crime and with no legislative oversight.
Right. And by the way, the IMF has told the federal government and CBN they have to build a framework that helps to fight cybersecurity, or fight cyber crimes rather, a framework for cybersecurity. But one conversation we ought to have would be this now. First, what is the state of insecurity within the cyberspace, especially in the financial sector? How bad is it that the federal government have to think about this particular law? And secondly, we'll also look at the items exempted. Because many feel, when you look at the exempted items on the list, some of it being loan disbursement and repayment, let's look at the items exempted on the screen. Well, one of it being loan disbursement and repayment, salary payments, they say, meaning when salaries are paid from companies or whatever agencies that ought not to be taxed. And we're talking about intra-account transfers within the same bank or between different banks for the same period. Well, others involving other financial institutions, instructions to their correspondent, bank interbank placements, bank transfers to CBN and vice versa, interbranch transfers within a bank, checks, clearing and settlements, letters of credit, a bank's recapitalization, related funding, only bulk funds movement for collection accounts, savings and deposits, including transactions involving long-term investments such as treasury bills, bonds, and commercial papers, government social welfare program transactions, example, pension payments, non-profit and charitable transactions, including donations to registered non-profit organizations or charities, and also at number 15 on the list, educational institutions transaction, including tuition fees or tuition payments, and other transactions involving schools, universities, or other educational institutions. And the last one on the list, number 16, states transaction involving banks' internal accounts, such as a suspense account, clearing account, profit and loss account, interbranch account, reserve account, nostro and vostro account, and escrow account. Some of them I do not know the nostro, vestro, and escrow and all of it. And many Nigerians are not really aware of it. Now the question, Ebel Udi, would be this now. You've seen the list. And many might say, well, by these exemptions, this tax might not affect most Nigerians. You buy into the same idea?
I think, to be honest with you, those transactions listed, they form less than 15% of bank transactions across the country.
Okay.
And look, if the CBN wants to be honest with us, let us look at, if you have a NIBS report, let NIBS do a data analytics of transactions, Majority of transactions we see today are inter-account transactions across banks. You understand? Everybody has their preference in bank account. Even in a family of 10, everybody has different accounts. And we see that flow of funds go from one bank to another every blessed day. And that's why at some point, you realize that the interbank transactions was charged at 50 naira once, but CBN, seeing that banks were making money, reduced it to 26 naira 88 kobo, knowing that a lot of banks were making money. This list, they form less than 50% of total volume of transactions that banks do on a daily basis.
So you're saying Nigerians would be highly affected by this? So you're saying that Nigerians would be highly affected by this?
You see, the people will be highly affected by this because retail account in the banks today is over 50 million. Over 50 million retail account. You know, that personal account is about 50 million in Nigeria. And if you look at it, a lot of these transactions, a lot of these accounts are active accounts of individuals, and monies flow between these accounts every blessed day. So that means if I have to send money to my wife who has an account in FCMB and I bank with Sterling, I have to pay 15 naira, except I coerce my wife to come and bank with Sterling. You understand? So this list, you know, does not do justice to what actually happened in the banking sector. If you want to, for an insight, you need to ask yourself, what is the drive towards fintechs? O.5, MoneyPoint, and the likes. People looking for cheaper alternatives. And these companies have come to stay, and they're actually giving banks a run for their money. It shows to you that the majority of bank transactions are actually inter-account and inter-bank transactions, and not the list that we have here. Because with this list alone, you know, it will affect an insignificant portion of Nigerian population. But if you apply it to interbank and intra-account transactions, you are actually taxing over 90% of Nigerian customers of banks.
Absolutely. Big concern, sir. I wanted to get that information from you. Well, let's also talk about one thing now. The IMF have asked CBN to stop waivers for banks. Well, one of those conversations is a caution against the federal government over the postponed amendment of to the act establishing the Apex Bank, saying the autonomy of the central bank must be preserved. The conversation from IMF beyond the waiver, because in that report they never mentioned which waiver they were talking about in that regard, but one of those intriguing conversations that caught my attention was when they lamented the absence of a clear hierarchy among the objectives of a CBN, coupled with the inclusion of government representatives on the board of directors and potentially the Monetary Policy Committee, as outlined in the 2007 CBN Act. Here is the conversation CBN are saying. They're saying, look, on the monetary front, monetary policy, when we have monetary policy meeting, and within the board of directors, within the CBN, and there are government officials there that ought not to be there. And it's talking about the sanctity of the CBN, preserving it as an independent, separate body. You look at from a Nigerian point of view and look at the policies from CBN. You think CBN always try to work in tandem with what the government, the present government is doing. In other words, the federal government is influencing the decisions of the CBN. You think in that direction?
Now, we need to look at things objectively and not from what the IMF tells us. Now, who appoints the CBN governor?
The president, then? The
president. Yeah, the president appoints a CBN of his choice, who he feels is comfortable with his policy directions. You understand? So, you can't divert the CBN from the federal government. You understand?
In other words, the CBN isn't as independent as we claim.
You know, look, when it comes to monetary policy, the CBN is actually independent of the federal government because it is the CBN ruled by the Constitution to manage the monetary policies of the country. However, you can't run the country's monetary policy in isolation to the fiscal policy. And that is why we have representatives of the Federal Ministry of Finance. Because, you know, CBN will think of managing the volume of money. But they also need to understand the government. If the government decides, look, we want to spend on infrastructure, you know, there has to be a trade-off. If you spend on infrastructure, volume of money in the economy will increase. How will it affect monetary policy if you are trying to mop the economy of money? So I think it's a win-win for the. I don't think there's anything wrong in having members of the officials of the Federal Ministry of Finance on the board of the CBN. They are just there on an advisory role and provide clarity and information about the fiscal policy, so that at every point in time, the CBN will not be blinking in the dark when it comes to things like critical issues such as managing the volume of money in society, in the economy. So I think we should look at we should actually run with this arrangement, because fiscal policy cannot work without a monetary policy, and monetary policy cannot function effectively without understanding the nitty-gritties of the fiscal policy and the mind of the federal government.
Okay, before we go on that quick break, let's talk about one of the talking points. It would be the fact that CBN recently eased restriction on repatriating FX proceeds from international oil companies in Nigeria. And part of that discussion was a circular by its Director of Trade and Exchange, Dr. Mahmoud Hassan, that the CBN said the IOCs, talking about international oil companies, can now use oil and gas export proceeds in the country to settle petroleum tax obligation and contractors' invoices, but it didn't end there. Because from the circular that came in February 2024, the bank had directed that only 50% of oil and gas export proceeds could be taken out of the country immediately. Only 50% could be taken out, and the rest 50 remain. And recently we're hearing that the Apex Bank also directed that revenue from IOCs must be held in the country for at least 90 days before being taken out. So it's no more just 50% taken out. 90 days it should stay and be taken out, and probably can be used also to settle petroleum tax obligation and contractors, investors. What do you make of all of this?
I think for now, the oil prospecting is a very huge and capital intensive, and requires a lot of funding to survive. So if the CBN decides to trap funds in Nigeria, parent companies, you'll be starting parent companies of all these IOCs or funds to run their operations, and eventually it will affect Nigeria's oil output. For me, I deal with a lot of oil servicing companies that do technical work for IOCs, and when IOCs they don't have access to their monies, they can't pay the service companies, and sometimes operations come to a halt. You understand? So, for me, the issue, I normally say things about in managing supply or demand issues, you create you stimulate the other part that is not available. If demand is an issue, you understand, you stimulate supply. If supply is an issue, you stimulate demand. You see, you cannot use ceiling, you understand, to manage an economy. You understand? What the CBN, I think the federal government, what they're trying to do now, they're trying to sell 17 marginal oil fields to increase Nigeria's oil production. If you can do all these things and stimulate more supply of crude oil, we'll get the needed effects. But not holding on to monies that are not ours. Actually, for business, it is wrong that I get money and I can't pay my contractors, suppliers, and repatriate funds to my parent company. It is wrong. And I think the CBN has realized that, look, it's a stifling business in the oil and gas sector, and have decided, look, at the moment you make the money, you can have access to 50% of your funds, while we have 50% to run the economy in 90 days, hoping that within that 90 days, you will get more funds, give 50%, and we'll roll, and we'll have another 50% to run other trade services until Nigeria has enough FX to actually run the economy.
All right.
So I think the CBN is actually listening to businesses, and while they are trying some policies, it doesn't work. They try to relax these policies and allow businesses to thrive.
So it's a little back and forth from the CBN. Anyway, we heard similar story from the international aid transporters regarding their trap funds. And it's been a conversation all year. At some point we heard the CBN had released some of those funds. Well, Mr. Ebeludi, you're saying it's not good enough from the CBN holding funds, especially for businesses. And I think in that direction, many people would think in that direction. Amid the crisis in the FX market, and CBN trying to look forward to helping the Naira stabilize and be strong within the context of financial markets. We'll go on a quick break, and when we're back, Business 101 continues, looking at CBN policies and the implications of it. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back. It is Business 101, and my name is Vladimir Kim. Having a conversation with Abel Udi, an economist, in that regard, giving perspective to everything regarding the policy from the CBN. In recent times, about the last 2 weeks, it's been policy upon policy, circular upon circular from the CBN, beginning with the cybersecurity levy, which we've spoken about. And now let's begin a conversation because Abel Udi is still around, available for some talking point. Well, let's talk about CBN. As CBN had released licensed deposit money bank, a list of licensed deposit money bank in Nigeria, 44 of them. And from the list that came out from the CBN, Abel Udi, we saw 7 banks, including Zenith Bank, Access Bank, First Bank, First City Monument Bank, United Bank of Africa, Fidelity and Guarantee Trust Bank, having commercial banking licenses with international authorization. Of April 26, 2024, similarly, 4 banks with commercial banking licenses with regional authorization and 4 interest banks having national authorization. And the bank said in the country, the 6 merchant banks were licensed with national authorization, and CBN added that the country has a Mauritius Commercial Bank Representative Office. Well, one talking point around here is that this thing is coming at a time where CBN had raised the minimum capital requirement for all banks in Nigeria to strengthen the country's financial sector. Well, for some of them, the list had gone from 25 billion naira to 500 billion naira, depending on which category. For international licenses, commercial banks, about 200 billion naira, and regional authorization, 50 billion naira, merchant banks, 50 billion naira, and so on and so forth. Talking about non-interest banks with national and regional authorization of 20 billion naira and 10 billion naira respectively. It seems so sudden the licenses are given. Does it now mean that all these banks have met the requirement?
I think the CBN released that list for clarity's sake.
Okay.
And also for clarity's sake, because these banks have been there. And it's just for Nigerians to know that, look, this is what we have at the moment, and this is the class of banks that we have, and this is where their category is. Okay. Because when CBN announced the recapitalization plans for banks, we saw a whole lot of lists. We saw FCMB listed as a national bank, as having a national license. We saw Fidelity listed as having a national license. But now CBN has come out to clarify where each of the banks stay. And that also will help people to understand, to know the capital requirement that these banks will need to meet to maintain their licenses, or if they are to keep their licenses, to step down their license from wherever it is, be from international to national, from national to regional. I think the list was released for clarity's sake, you understand, because a whole lot of information from different research companies was coming out, giving different classifications to the banks in the Nigerian economy. And also, a lot of Nigerians are apprehensive with new banks coming on board at this point, because a lot of regional banks came on board, and a lot of Nigerians were apprehensive, and it was difficult to get customers. But CBN need to come out to say, look, these banks are licensed, and this is the class of license they have. You can do business with them. But it doesn't stop the recapitalization plans.
Okay. One other interesting talking point for me would be this one. We heard that the CBN ordered Nigerian banks to suspend cash deposit charges. It was an order that came May 6, 2024 from a circular signed by the Director of Banking Supervision at Daytona Adedeji, but the suspension will last until September 30th, 2024, and begun to ask why, as the development came as Nigerian banks charged 2% on deposits above 500,000 naira for individuals, while corporate account holders were to be charged 2% on deposits above 3 million naira. As a Nigerian and individuals within the country, even some businesses, many people are wondering, what's all this about?
Well, the issue of cash handling charge has always been on the front burner of CBN's cashless policy since the days of the former CBN governor, Sanusi Lamde Sanusi. In fact, at some point, it was applicable in Lagos, Abuja, and Port Harcourt before it was suspended, and now the CBN is trying to reintroduce it. You see, the thing about cash, a lot of banks, the banks are in support of the cash handling charge because it provides another revenue for them. Because banks spend a whole lot on maintaining counting machines and a lot of things, and also the charge. It's not about the money itself. It's actually about discouraging use of cash. You understand? However, at this point, reintroducing the cash handling charge when there is shortage of cash of the naira, so to say, in the economy is an issue. That people might not be able to reconcile themselves to. I need to give you an instance because I'm a retail banker, and what we see every day is that Nigerians, but people don't bring money to banks anymore. POS merchants go to business, go to shops and buy monies from them. That's why you go to the banks. What you see from the banks every day is that banks can pay more than 20,000 per customer, 10,000 per customer. They ration what is available. So if you introduce the cash handling charge, most business owners at the SME level will not bring their cash to banks. They will rather sell their cash to POS businesses. Rather than incurring costs, they will sell their money and make it spread. That's just it. So I think the essence of the cash handling charge back then was to move people towards the use of alternative channels. If you are introducing it now, it will still mean people will gravitate towards alternative channels, and businesses that generate cash above 3 million will rather give their monies to POS businesses rather than bring it to the bank.
All right. Well, according to information I had, one of the reasons was because money outside the banking system rose by 10.67% to 3.63 trillion naira in March 2024. Well, let's talk about further one. The federal government, on the other hand, early this week we had a report that $750 million World Bank loan they were looking at. And one of the ways they could achieve that was to bring back the telecoms tax. You've heard about the telecoms tax before now. In quest of getting $750 million loan from the World Bank, they may reintroduce previously suspended telecom tax and other fiscal measures. Are you worried about it, as many Nigerians were worried about it when it came out first? Because it seemed to be one of the requirements from World Bank, and they were supposed to make a certain budgetary amount of money, about $1.1 billion at the time for them to get this loan. And one of those ways was telecoms tax. You think this particular government, lots of taxation here and there, we always hear on the media, either President Bola Tinubu is talking with Bill Gates about creating more adequate system for taxation, and there's taxation one way or the other talking about that involve diesel, taxation in different areas, electricity hike, and all of that. What do you make of this one?
Well, Blyden, I need to ask you: Are you in Nigeria at the moment?
Well, I am.
Have you tried to withdraw 100,000 from a bank account in the last 2 or 3 months?
No, I haven't. Economists had.
Yeah. If you make an attempt to withdraw cash, hardly will a bank pay you 50,000 because the money is not there. See, except maybe the money is the volume of money outside the banking system is in FX and in people's homes. You understand? Even if you go to the regular ITA market, you understand, people are now accepting transfers. You understand? So sometimes when the CBN comes out with their position, we need to look at the reality on the ground. You understand? However, let's go back to the issue of the telecom tax. It boils down to what we're saying. Look, you see, we want to take a facility from the World Bank. The World Bank is saying impose more taxes. Now, if you're imposing more taxes, who are you imposing those taxes on? You're imposing those taxes on the people.
Yeah.
And if you impose more taxes on the people, you are impoverishing them further. The truth is that Nigerians cannot bear these taxes. Every day, thousands of people are falling below the poverty line. So except maybe this facility is going to stimulate the economy where it trickles down to the pocket of the people, I think this particular facility and the means of repayment through a telecom tax is ill-advised. And between you and I think we should understand that, look, it is not every remedy from the World Bank and the IMF that is good for the people of the Federal Republic of Nigeria or even Africa as a whole.
Well, many concerns are from you, especially regarding taxation in the country, and many begin to wonder where we're going to in the country. Things are difficult for many. Inflation quite hard, interest rates quite high, taxation here and there, every angle you turn to. There's a sense of taxation from within the economy, the CBN policy also, in tandem with the federal government policies. But Ebeludi says enough is enough. It's much already and it's impoverishing the people. Ebel, massive conversation we've had in the world of business and in Business 101, looking at the federal government and CBN working in tandem and recent policies in that regard. One final question for you before you leave the show. When you look at Nigeria's economy so far, you've been around talking about the economy and the direction we're going to. You've seen various policies from this particular government, and now CBN adding one way or the other, one of it and the next another and another. I mean, all that we've talked about. You think there've been progress right from the last time you were on this show, talking about Nigeria's economy and the direction we're going to?
Well, what I would say is that this administration is still a work in progress. They've not gotten it right. Policies that they've enacted and have not been working, they've been bold enough to reverse them. And I think Nigerians have no choice. We've elected this administration for the next 4 years, and we just have to wait and see. You understand? However, we must, as Nigerians, must continue to voice, our disaffection to policies that will affect our further impoverish us. I think that is my take on the economy as a whole for now. Because right now, Nigerians have no option. We have to follow the lead of the Mr. President. We have to follow the lead of the CBN governor and the Ministry of Finance. And however, those policies that affect us negatively, we are at liberty to say, look, we do not want this policy. And it is a duty and obligation of the federal government to listen to us.
All right, the question is if they'll listen to you and I and the common Nigerians speaking about the policies and the impact in the economy. When you mentioned 4 years, the next 4 years, well, the Nigerian in me, I think many people at home also think, is it 4 years or 8 years? Well, it's a conversation from a political class. Here is Business 101, and we'll be drawing the curtain here. Mr. Ebeludi, thank you for being a part of the show and for all your intake and output you've given us in the course of it. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me, Blyden. My pleasure any day to join the program.
Absolutely. Your thoughts are well appreciated on the show. Well, thank you for also being a part of the show, looking at policies from the CBN and the direction it's taking Nigerians. Is it impoverishing Nigerians or is making the economy better? It's been our conversation this particular evening, and here we draw the curtain on today's edition of Business 101. Thank you for being a part of it till we come your way next week. My name is Vladimir Kim, and I say thank you again.